"That car is worthless," Richard Whitmore said, loud enough for the whole courtyard to hear, and the laughter that followed rolled across the marble steps like a cold wind. Ethan Walker stood beside the old covered shape behind the estate garage, his work boots dusty, his denim jacket faded at the elbows, his hands still marked with grease from a morning spent fixing brakes for a schoolteacher who could barely pay him. Around him, men in tailored suits held champagne glasses and women in silk dresses smiled behind careful fingers, all of them gathered for the Whitmore Foundation's annual charity auction in Cleveland, Ohio, where even generosity seemed to arrive wearing a price tag. Ethan did not belong there, and everyone knew it. He had only come because the estate manager had called his small garage and asked if he could look at a stalled catering van before the guests arrived. He had fixed it in 20 minutes, charged half his usual fee, and was walking back toward his pickup when he saw the tarp in the old carriage house lift slightly in the breeze. Beneath it was a curve of metal, a shape most people would have missed, but Ethan stopped as if someone had whispered his name. His 8-year-old daughter, Lily, stood beside him holding a paper cup of lemonade the kitchen staff had given her, her hearing aid tucked behind one ear, her eyes following his. "Daddy," she asked softly, "what is it?" Ethan did not answer right away. He stepped closer, not touching, just looking. There were things old cars said before they ever started. A line in the hood. The fall of a fender. The quiet confidence of something built by hands, not machines. Then Richard Whitmore saw him. The billionaire crossed the courtyard with the easy irritation of a man who believed everything within sight existed because he allowed it to. His silver hair was perfect, his navy suit sharper than Sunday judgment, and behind him walked his daughter, Clara Whitmore, 34, composed, pale-eyed, and watchful. "You like junk, mechanic?" Richard asked. A few guests turned. Ethan lowered his eyes, not from shame, but from habit. "I was just looking, sir." Richard laughed and grabbed the edge of the tarp. "Then look." He pulled it away. Dust burst into the afternoon light. There sat an old coupe with cracked paint, flat tires, cloudy glass, and a hood ornament long gone missing. To the crowd, it looked dead. To Ethan, it looked like it was holding its breath. Clara folded her arms. "It has no paperwork," she said. "No known provenance. My father planned to scrap it with the rest of the barn contents. Because," Richard said, tapping the roof with two careless knuckles, "it is worthless." Laughter came again, louder this time. Lily moved closer to Ethan's side. "Why are they laughing?" she whispered. Ethan looked at the car, then at the little girl who trusted him more than the world ever had. "Because sometimes people stop listening when something gets old," he said. Richard smirked. "Tell you what, Walker. If your expert eyes see treasure, make an offer. Otherwise, stop blocking the view." Ethan's wallet held $42. His bank account held almost nothing. The surgery estimate for Lily's hearing sat folded in his glove compartment like a prayer he could not afford to finish. He should have walked away. Any reasonable man would have. But then he saw it, half hidden beneath the dust near the side vent, a tiny hand-stamped mark no factory line ever made. Ethan's breath slowed. Clara noticed. Richard did not. $500, Ethan said quietly. The courtyard went still for half a second before the laughter broke open again. Richard's smile widened with cruelty polished into charm. "Sold," he said. "But when it doesn't run, don't call me." Ethan nodded once. He did not defend himself. He did not explain what he had seen. He simply took Lily's hand as the sun slid behind the Whitmore mansion and the old car sat between them like a secret waiting 7 days to humble every proud voice in that courtyard. By the time Ethan Walker backed his old pickup into the gravel lot behind Walker and Son Garage, the sky over Cleveland had turned the color of worn steel. The coupe sat on the rented flatbed behind him, tied down with frayed orange straps, its dusty body rocking gently every time the truck rolled over a pothole. Lily sat in the passenger seat. With both hands wrapped around the seatbelt, quiet in that careful way children become quiet when they know money is sitting heavy in the air. $500 was not a fortune to the people at the Whitmore estate. It was not even dinner money to Richard Whitmore. But to Ethan, it was groceries, gas, a month of electric bills, and another small piece of the surgery fund that had taken 2 years to build. He parked beside the garage, turned off the engine, and for a moment neither father nor daughter moved. The old neon sign above the office window flickered twice, humming against the dusk. Walker and Son Garage had once belonged to Ethan's father, then to Ethan and his wife, Rachel, and now, in the quietest way, to Ethan and Lily. It was not much to look at. 2 service bays. A cracked concrete floor. A coffee maker that worked only when it felt merciful. A wall calendar from 3 years ago that Lily refused to let him throw away because her mother had circled her birthday on it in blue ink. "Are we in trouble?" Lily asked. Ethan looked at her, and the question landed deeper than he expected. "Not tonight," he said. "But maybe we made tonight a little more complicated." She nodded as if that answer was fair. Ethan stepped out, the cold air smelling of oil, rain, and October leaves. He helped Lily down, then opened the garage doors. The rollers groaned overhead, and the shadows inside stretched back like an old church waiting for candles. Every tool had its place because Ethan needed at least one part of life to stay where he left it. Wrenches hung by size. Rags were folded in a metal bin. Rachel's old radio sat on the shelf above the workbench, silent now, though Lily sometimes touched the dial as if music might still be hiding inside. Together they unloaded the coupe inch by inch. The winch complained. The flat tires dragged. Dust slipped from the fenders in soft gray sheets. When the car finally settled onto the garage floor, Ethan stood back and simply looked. "It is ugly," Lily said carefully. Ethan smiled. "A lot of beautiful things are, at first." She studied him, then the car. "Do you really think it is special?" "I think it has been waiting for somebody to ask the right questions." Lily walked closer, her small sneakers squeaking against the concrete. The hearing aid behind her ear gave a faint whistle, and she pressed it gently, pretending not to be frustrated. Ethan saw it. He always saw it. The doctors had said the procedure needed to happen soon, before the damage became harder to correct. Soon was a cruel word when bills came every Friday and miracles did not. He reached for the folded estimate in his jacket pocket, felt the paper there, then let it go. "Daddy," Lily said, "Mom used to say you could hear engines like other people hear songs." Ethan swallowed softly. "Your mom believed a lot of generous things about me." Maybe she was right. Outside, a car passed on the wet street, its tires whispering through shallow puddles. Inside, the garage held its breath. Ethan pulled on his work gloves, not because the car required it yet, but because he needed his hands to stop shaking. He lifted the edge of the hood, slowly, respectfully, like opening a letter from someone long gone. The hinges resisted, then gave with a tired sigh. Beneath the hood, the engine was dirty, incomplete, and still somehow honest. Ethan leaned in. No boasting. No celebration. Just attention. Then he saw another mark, stamped low near the firewall, almost hidden beneath grime and old paint. His face changed so slightly that only Lily noticed. "What?" she whispered. Ethan did not answer right away. He reached for a rag, wiped once, then stopped. The mark was real. Not a coincidence. Not a dream. Not yet proof, but enough to make the room feel different. "Lily," he said quietly, "bring me the small flashlight." She hurried to the workbench. Ethan kept staring at the mark, and in the silence of that little garage, with unpaid bills on the desk and a billionaire's laughter still echoing in his memory, the worthless car began to tell the first line of its story. The flashlight beam cut across the firewall in a narrow white line, catching dust, old paint, and the faint stamped mark Ethan had almost been afraid to believe. He held his breath, wiped the metal again with the edge of a clean cloth, and leaned closer until the cold frame was only inches from his face. Lily stood beside him on a wooden step stool, holding the light with both hands, her little brow folded in concentration. "Is it a number?" she asked. "Part of one," Ethan said. "And part of a maker's mark. Is that good?" Ethan looked at the sleeping engine, then toward the office window where the unpaid invoices waited beneath a magnet shaped like a sunflower. "It is a reason to keep going." He worked until after midnight, not tearing the car apart, not rushing like a man chasing money, but moving with quiet respect, the way his father had taught him to handle anything older than his own grief. A small brush for the seams. Cotton cloth for the dash. Warm water, no harsh chemicals, because some history disappears when men get impatient. Lily fell asleep on the cracked leather couch in the office, wrapped in Ethan's flannel shirt, while rain tapped against the garage roof like fingers asking to be let in. By 2 in the morning, Ethan had found 3 more signs that the coupe was not ordinary. The hood vents were hand-cut, not stamped. The inside door panel had French pencil markings beneath the wood trim. And under the passenger seat, wrapped in dry rotted cloth, was a small aluminum plate with 2 letters and 4 numbers that made Ethan sit back on his heels and close his eyes. He had seen that pattern once before in a restoration archive, years ago, when he was still working for a private automobile museum outside Toledo, before Rachel got sick, before hospital rooms replaced showrooms, before life taught him that love could be both a blessing and a bill. At 7:15 the next morning, Clara Whitmore arrived in a black sedan that looked too clean for the street it parked on. She stepped out wearing a camel coat, dark slacks, and the guarded expression of a woman trained to doubt first and regret later. Ethan was sweeping the garage entrance. Lily was inside eating cereal from a paper bowl, watching through the office glass. "Mr. Walker," Clara said. "Miss Whitmore. My father says you paid cash and signed the sale receipt." "That is right. He also says you looked like a man who knew something." Ethan rested both hands on the broom handle. "Your father says a lot of things." Her eyes narrowed, but not with anger. With assessment. "I am not here to insult you." "Then you are already doing better than yesterday." A passing truck rattled over a pothole. Somewhere inside the garage, the old wall clock clicked with the slow confidence of something that had survived worse conversations. Clara glanced past him toward the coupe. "May I see it?" Ethan considered saying no. He had every right to. But truth did not grow stronger in darkness. He stepped aside. Clara walked in slowly, her heels giving way to careful footsteps as the garage smell wrapped around her, motor oil, old rubber, coffee, rainwater, and patience. She circled the coupe once. At first, her face stayed professional, almost cold. Then she saw the hand-cut vents. Her pace slowed. She bent near the passenger side, studying the curve of the fender. "This bodywork is unusual," she said. Ethan said nothing. "Where did you find this plate?" she asked. "Under the seat." "Did you remove anything else?" "No, why not?" Ethan looked at Lily, who was pretending not to listen. "Because when something has been buried for a long time, you do not drag it into the light by force." Clara's expression shifted, so small it might have been mistaken for the shadow of rain across the window. For the first time, she looked less like Richard Whitmore's daughter and more like someone who had once loved beautiful things before money taught her to price them. She took out her phone, photographed the plate, then the firewall mark, then the pencil writing beneath the trim. "This still proves nothing," she said. "I know. It could be a clever assembly of parts. It could. It could be worth less than what you paid." Ethan nodded. "It could." Clara looked at him then, truly looked, searching for greed and finding only exhaustion, dignity, and a father trying not to let his daughter see fear. "Why risk $500, she asked. Ethan picked up the small aluminum plate and held it in his palm. Because some things are called worthless only by people who never learned how to recognize value. Clara had no quick answer for that. The rain softened outside. Lily stepped quietly from the office, cereal bowl in hand, and said, "My dad hears things other people miss." Clara looked at the child, then back at Ethan, and in the long silence that followed, the first wall between them began to crack. By late morning, the rumor had already outrun the rain. By noon, half of West Park seemed to know that Ethan Walker had spent $500 on a dead car from the Whitmore estate, and by 3 o'clock, people had decided the story was not sad enough unless Lily's surgery money was part of it. That was how small towns worked inside big cities. They took a fact, wrapped it in judgment, and passed it around like coffee at a diner. At Miller's Market, the cashier lowered her voice when Ethan bought milk and bread. At the gas station, 2 men near the pump stopped talking when he walked by. Even Hank Dorsey from the parts store called and said, "Ethan, tell me you did not gamble your little girl's future on a rust bucket." Ethan stood in the garage office with the phone pressed to his ear, looking through the glass at Lily doing homework at the counter. "I did not gamble," he said. "Then what do you call it?" Hank asked. Ethan watched Lily sound out a sentence from her reading sheet, leaning closer than usual, her finger tracing each word because her hearing had been worse that week. "I call it listening," Ethan said, and hung up before anger could borrow his voice. The afternoon light fell soft and gray through the garage windows. Clara had left an hour earlier with photographs on her phone and doubt in her eyes, but Ethan could feel that doubt changing shape. It was not belief yet. Belief was expensive. People like Clara did not spend it quickly. Still, she had looked at the hand-cut vents twice. She had taken 3 pictures of the aluminum plate. And when Lily said Ethan heard things other people missed, Clara had not laughed. That mattered. Ethan returned to the coupe and began removing the passenger door panel with a small flat tool wrapped in cloth. Every screw came loose with a tired little creak. Every piece of wood trim carried the scent of age, dust, and something faintly sweet, like old paper stored in a cedar chest. Lily finished her worksheet and came closer. "Can I help?" "You can hold the tray." "The screw tray?" "The very important screw tray." She smiled, and for a moment the world became lighter. They worked side by side as the heater clicked on and the garage settled into its evening sounds. A delivery truck groaned past outside. Rainwater dripped from the awning in slow, steady taps. The fluorescent light above Bay 2 buzzed like it was trying to remember a hymn. When the panel finally loosened, Ethan lifted it away with both hands. Something slipped from inside and landed against Lily's sneaker with a dry, papery sound. She froze. "Daddy." Ethan crouched. Behind the lower brace, protected from 80 years of weather by accident or grace, was a thin metal box no larger than a paperback book. Its edges were dull. Its latch was stiff. Lily handed it to him as if it were alive. "Should we open it?" she whispered. Ethan looked at the coupe, then at his daughter. "Gently." The latch resisted, then clicked. Inside lay 3 things, a black and white photograph, a pair of cream-colored driving gloves folded with heartbreaking care, and a brittle envelope marked in blue ink. Ethan lifted the photograph first. It showed a young woman standing beside the very same car, not dusty and forgotten, but shining beneath California sun. She wore trousers, a fitted jacket, and a smile that looked too fearless for the year printed on the back. Monterey, 1939. Lily leaned close. "She looks happy." Ethan turned the photograph over. There was a name written there in elegant script. Evelyn Hart. Ethan's hand stilled. The garage seemed to go quiet around that name. He knew it. Not well, not from textbooks, because people like Evelyn Hart rarely got the space they deserved in textbooks. But he remembered a footnote from an old archive, a female American driver who had vanished from competition history after a scandal nobody could prove and nobody powerful wanted reopened. He opened the envelope next. Inside was a faded registration copy, a shipping receipt from France to New York, and one short handwritten note. Clara returned just as Ethan unfolded it. She stepped into the garage without her coat buttoned, rain shining on her hair, her face no longer cold, only urgent. "My father called our attorney," she said. "He wants the car back." Ethan looked up slowly. Lily clutched the photograph to her chest. Clara saw the metal box, the gloves, the papers, and the color left her face. "Where did you find those?" she asked. "Inside the door." Clara moved closer, reading the name on the photograph. "Evelyn Hart," she whispered. Ethan nodded once. Outside, thunder rolled gently over Cleveland, not loud, not threatening, just deep enough to make the windows tremble. Clara looked at Ethan as if the garage floor had shifted beneath both of them. "If this is real," she said, "your car is not just rare." Ethan folded the note with quiet hands. "Then we had better make sure truth gets there before your father does." Richard Whitmore arrived at Walker & Son Garage the next morning in a black Cadillac Escalade that looked too large for the cracked little parking lot. Behind him came a second car carrying his attorney, a thin man with silver glasses and a leather folder pressed against his chest like a shield. Ethan saw them through the office window while packing Lily's lunch for school. Peanut butter sandwich. Apple slices. A small note folded beneath the napkin that said, "I am proud of you, kiddo." Lily watched the Escalade stop beside the bay doors and went quiet. "Is he here for the car?" she asked. Ethan closed the lunchbox gently. "He is here because he changed his mind." "Can he take it?" Ethan looked at his daughter, then toward the coupe resting beneath clean white sheets in Bay 2. "Not if the truth still matters." Richard entered without knocking, his shoes clicking against the concrete as if the garage belonged to him already. The attorney followed, careful not to touch anything. Clara stepped in last, and the look on her face told Ethan she had tried to stop this and failed. "Mr. Walker," Richard said, smooth as polished stone. "There has been a misunderstanding." Ethan wiped his hands on a rag. "There was a sale." The attorney opened his folder. "The estate is prepared to refund your payment and compensate you for towing expenses." "How generous," Ethan said quietly. Richard smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Do not make this difficult. You bought an unidentified vehicle under incomplete disclosure." Ethan walked to the office desk, opened the drawer, and removed the receipt. He placed it on the counter between them. $500. Paid in full. Vehicle sold as scrap, no warranty, no return. Richard's jaw tightened. Clara looked away. "You called it worthless," Ethan said. "In front of witnesses." "That was casual language." "No," Ethan replied. "That was judgment." The garage fell into a silence so clean it made the buzz of the fluorescent lights sound louder. Lily stood near the office door with her backpack on, watching adults argue over a thing her father had touched with more respect than they had shown a person. Richard glanced at her, then back at Ethan. "You are risking your child's future over pride." Ethan's eyes changed, not with rage, but with something steadier. "Do not use my daughter to dress up your regret." Clara's breath caught softly. The attorney cleared his throat. "Mr. Walker, if there are documents inside the vehicle that connect it to the Whitmore estate, those materials may be considered retained property." Ethan turned to the workbench and lifted the metal box into view. He did not open it. He did not flaunt it. He simply set it down with the quiet dignity of a man laying evidence before a judge. "These were found inside the vehicle after purchase," he said. "They stay with the vehicle until ownership history is verified by an independent authority." Richard's face hardened. "You think you are very clever." "No, sir," Ethan said. "I think I am careful." Clara stepped forward then, her voice controlled but trembling at the edges. "Father, if the documents are authentic, this should go through proper review." Richard turned on her with a cold stare. You work for my foundation. I work in valuation, Clara said. And value does not disappear because it embarrasses us. For the first time, Richard had no immediate answer. Outside, a school bus hissed to a stop at the corner. Lily looked at the clock, then at Ethan. He knelt, zipped her jacket, and brushed a crumb from her sleeve with a tenderness that made Clara look down. Go on, sweetheart, he said. Mrs. Alvarez will walk you from the stop. Lily hugged him tightly. Do not let him call it junk again, she whispered. Ethan smiled faintly. I will let the car answer for itself. After Lily left, Richard leaned closer, lowering his voice. You have 7 days before my legal team buries this place in paperwork. Ethan folded the receipt once and slipped it back into the drawer. Then I have 7 days to tell the truth. Richard stared at him, waiting for fear, waiting for apology, waiting for the poor mechanic to remember his place. But Ethan only walked to the coupe, pulled back the sheet, and rested one hand near the faded hood mark. The old car did not shine yet. It did not need to. In that little garage, beneath weak lights and gathering pressure, it had already begun to take back its name. For the next 7 days, Walker and Son Garage stopped feeling like a repair shop and began to feel like a courtroom where every bolt, every number, and every faded piece of paper had been called to testify. Ethan moved with a calm that made the pressure around him seem even louder. He did not slam drawers. He did not curse Richard Whitmore's name. He did not tell Lily everything would be fine when he did not know that yet. He simply worked. At 6 in the morning, he made oatmeal, packed her lunch, and checked the battery in her hearing aid. At 7:30, he walked her to the bus stop beneath a pale Cleveland sky. At 8, he unlocked the garage and entered the silence like a man entering prayer. Clara came each morning with archive folders, valuation records, and old auction catalogs from Harrington and Vale. She no longer wore the expression of someone doing a favor. She wore the focus of someone trying to undo a family lie before it hardened into history. Together, she and Ethan traced the coupe's life backward through shipping manifests, insurance papers, estate transfers, and yellowed newspaper clippings. The name Evelyn Hart appeared only in fragments at first. A racing notice in Monterey. A photograph from a private road rally in California. A society column that called her bold in one sentence and troublesome in the next. They erased her politely, Clara said one evening, staring at the clipping beneath the desk lamp. Ethan looked up from the firewall rubbing. That is how powerful people do it when they want to sleep well. Clara did not defend them. That was new. On the third night, rain pressed softly against the garage windows while Lily slept on the office couch with Rachel's old quilt pulled to her chin. Ethan and Clara worked at the bench beneath the buzzing light, comparing the aluminum plate to a scanned registry from a French coach builder. The numbers almost matched, but one digit was unclear. Almost was not enough. Almost would not stop Richard. Almost would not save the garage. Clara rubbed her eyes. We need a cleaner proof. Ethan walked to the coupe and knelt beside the driver's side sill. Then we listen lower. Clara followed him. What does that mean? Custom builders marked places owners never saw. He ran his fingertips along the underside seam, feeling through dust and age until he stopped. There, beneath a strip of hardened road grime, was a small oval stamp pressed into the metal. He cleaned it slowly, breath steady, cloth moving in circles no wider than a quarter. Clara held the flashlight. Lily stirred in the office but did not wake. The stamp appeared one line at a time. Paris. 1937. Body number 12. Clara whispered the number before Ethan did. Then she opened the registry with shaking hands. Body number 12 had one recorded owner. Evelyn Hart. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The rain kept falling. The heater clicked once. Ethan sat back on his heels and closed his eyes, not like a man celebrating, but like a man grateful the truth had survived long enough to be found. Clara looked at him differently then, not with admiration alone, but with humility. "You knew where to look," she said. "No," Ethan answered. "I knew not to rush." The next morning, Clara sent the images to 2 independent experts, one in California and one in Connecticut. By afternoon, both asked the same question: "Where did you find this car?" By evening, both were willing to sign preliminary authentication letters pending visual inspection. Richard called 6 times. Ethan did not answer until Lily was asleep. When he finally picked up, Richard spoke first. "You are making a mistake." Ethan stood beside the coupe, the phone to his ear, one hand resting on the fender. "I have made plenty of those. This one will cost you." Ethan looked through the office glass at Lily's sleeping face, soft under the lamplight, brave in ways no child should have to be. "Maybe," he said. "But it will not cost me my dignity." On the other end, Richard was silent. Not defeated yet. Not sorry. But silent. And for Ethan Walker, after years of being spoken over by men with cleaner hands and louder voices, that silence was the first sound of justice turning its key. On the 7th morning, Cleveland woke under a clear blue sky, the kind that made every window in the city look newly washed. Ethan rose before the alarm, not because he had slept well, but because worry had been standing beside his bed for hours. He made coffee, burned the first piece of toast, and packed Lily's lunch with hands that moved slower than usual. Lily sat at the kitchen table wearing her yellow sweater, her hair brushed neatly, her hearing aid tucked behind her ear, and Rachel's old silver bracelet loose around her small wrist. "Is today the big day?" she asked. Ethan set a glass of orange juice beside her. "It is a day where we tell the truth in a room full of people." She considered that. "That sounds harder than a big day." "Sometimes it is." By 9 o'clock, the coupe was being loaded into an enclosed transport trailer sent by Harrington and Vale, wrapped not in glamour, but in care. The dust had not been polished away completely. Ethan had insisted on that. The cracked paint remained. The worn leather remained. The quiet scars remained. "Collectors need to see what survived," he told Clara. "Not what we tried to hide." Clara nodded, and for once, she did not argue. She had arranged a special evening auction at the Harrington and Vale showroom downtown, calling it a late-entry historical discovery, though everyone in the office knew the truth was more dangerous than the catalog line. Richard Whitmore had tried to block the sale through 2 letters, 1 emergency petition, and 3 phone calls to board members who owed him favors. But the receipt was clean. The authentication letters were stronger. And Clara, standing in her office with her father's voice cold through the speakerphone, had said the word that changed everything. No, he had gone quiet. Then he had said, "You are choosing a mechanic over your own family." Clara had looked through the glass wall toward the showroom floor, where Ethan was helping Lily carefully climb out of his pickup. "No," she said. "I am choosing the truth over fear." By 6 that evening, the showroom glowed with warm light and expensive restraint. Men in dark suits murmured near display cases. Women in pearl earrings studied catalog sheets. Phone bidders waited on private lines from California, New York, London, and Monaco. Ethan stood near the back in his only gray blazer, the sleeves a little short, his hands folded in front of him. Lily stood beside him, wide-eyed, clutching the small photograph of Evelyn Hart in a protective sleeve. "They are all staring," she whispered. "Not all," Ethan said. "Some are finally looking." Across the room, Richard Whitmore entered like a storm wearing a tuxedo. Conversations thinned around him. He did not greet Ethan. He did not greet Lily. He went straight to Clara near the podium. "End this before you humiliate yourself," he said under his breath. Clara looked at him calmly. "The car will speak for itself." "A car does not speak." From the back of the room, Ethan's voice came quiet but clear. "Only to people who never learned how to listen." A few heads turned. Richard's face flushed, but he said nothing. The auctioneer stepped up, adjusted his microphone, and introduced the coupe as it rolled slowly onto the platform under soft white lights. For a moment, there was disappointment in the room. It was not shining. It was not perfect. It looked wounded, dusty, and old. Then Clara stepped forward with the file in her hands. She spoke of the Paris body stamp, the hand-cut vents, the registry match, the shipping receipt, the Monterey photograph, and Evelyn Hart, a woman who had driven when certain rooms believed women should only wave from balconies. With each sentence, the air changed. The laughter from 7 days ago seemed to fade into something smaller and ashamed. The first bid came at $200,000. Then $400. Then $750. Ethan did not move. Lily reached for his hand. At $1 million, the room leaned forward. At $2 million, Richard stopped blinking. At $3 million, Clara's voice tightened on the next bid confirmation, not from fear, but from the weight of what was being restored. Ethan closed his eyes for one breath and thought of Rachel, of hospital bills, of old engines, of every man who had mistaken silence for weakness. When he opened them, the auctioneer was pointing to a phone representative near the front. $4 million. A hush fell over the showroom. Lily whispered, "Daddy." Ethan squeezed her hand gently. "Stand tall, sweetheart." The bidding continued, and somewhere beneath the lights, the forgotten car of Evelyn Hart began to rise higher than anyone proud had planned. $5 million, the auctioneer called, and the number moved through the showroom like a bell no one expected to hear. Ethan Walker stood still in the back row, one hand holding Lily's, the other resting against the seam of his gray blazer as if he were afraid any sudden movement might wake him from a dream. Around him, collectors who had entered the room with polite curiosity now leaned forward with open hunger. Catalog pages stopped rustling. Champagne glasses remained untouched. Phone representatives lifted their hands with sharper urgency, and the old coupe sat beneath the lights with its cracked paint and tired chrome, no longer looking abandoned, but witnessed. Clara stood beside the podium with the file pressed to her chest. Her voice had done its work. The documents had spoken. Evelyn Hart had been named. The Paris stamp had been verified. The old photograph had appeared on the screen behind the car, showing a young woman smiling beside that same body line in Monterey sunlight, her hand on the roof as if she had known the future would try to forget her and had smiled anyway. $5,200,000, said a bidder from New York. $5,500,000, answered the phone from London. Richard Whitmore sat in the front row, his face pale beneath the showroom glow. 7 days earlier, he had laughed with an entire courtyard behind him. Now he sat alone inside a room full of people learning what his pride had missed. His attorney whispered something into his ear. Richard did not respond. Clara looked at him once, not with revenge, not with cruelty, but with the sorrow of a daughter finally seeing the smallness of a powerful man. The bidding climbed again. 6 million. 6,400,000. 6,900,000. Lily's fingers tightened around Ethan's hand. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice barely strong enough to cross the air between them. "Is this really happening?" Ethan looked down at her, at the hearing aid behind her ear, at Rachel's bracelet around her wrist, at the child who had trusted him when adults called him foolish. "Yes, sweetheart," he said. "But remember, money is only loud. Truth is what lasts." The auctioneer turned toward the Monaco line. 7,200,000. A murmur rose, then died as quickly as it began. Clara stepped forward again. "Before we continue," she said, and every face turned to her, "there is one final document entered into the official record tonight." Richard's head snapped toward her. Clara opened the envelope Ethan had found in the door panel and lifted the handwritten note inside its protective sleeve. This letter was written by Evelyn Hart to a Whitmore family representative in 1940. It confirms that the vehicle was placed in temporary storage after her final public race, with instructions that it be preserved until her name could be cleared. Her voice trembled once, then steadied. It never was. Silence settled over the room, deep and complete. Ethan saw Richard close his eyes. The screen behind Clara displayed the last line of the letter in careful script: "Let the car remain until someone honest enough remembers why it mattered." No one breathed loudly. No one laughed. Then the Monaco bidder raised the offer. 7,800,000. The auctioneer repeated it, slower now, as if even he understood this was no longer just an auction. The New York bidder hesitated. London withdrew. California stayed in for one more breath, then stepped back. Clara looked toward Ethan, and in her eyes there was apology, respect, and something softer that neither of them had the courage to name yet. The auctioneer lifted his gaze across the room. $8 million, came the final bid from Monaco. A sound moved through the showroom, not applause, not shock exactly, but the collective inhale of people watching history stand up after being buried. $8 million going once. Richard's hand curled over the armrest. Going twice. Lily pressed her face into Ethan's sleeve. The gavel came down. Sold. For one perfect second, the entire room stayed silent. Ethan did not cheer. He did not look at Richard with triumph. He did not raise his fist or speak some clever line for the rich men to remember. He simply knelt in front of Lily, placed both hands on her shoulders, and smiled through tears he had been holding back for years. "Your mother was right," he whispered. "About what?" Lily asked. Ethan glanced at the old coupe, glowing softly under the lights like a promise finally kept. "Some things are not lost," he said. "They are just waiting for the right heart to find them." The silence after the sale did not break all at once. It loosened slowly, like ice letting go of a river. A few people began to clap, then more, until the sound filled the Harrington and Vale showroom and rose toward the high glass ceiling. But Ethan Walker barely heard it. He was still kneeling in front of Lily, still holding her shoulders, still looking into the eyes of the little girl who had believed him before evidence, before experts, before millionaires learned humility in public. Clara stepped down from the podium with the file in her arms. Her face was bright with emotion she did not try to hide anymore. Behind her, Richard Whitmore remained seated, smaller somehow, not because he had lost money, but because the room had finally seen what his certainty was worth. The auctioneer spoke with the Monaco representative. Cameras flashed near the coupe. Collectors gathered around the platform with reverence. And at the center of it all, the old car stood unchanged. Its paint was still cracked. Its tires were still tired. Its leather was still worn. Yet now those flaws looked less like damage and more like testimony. Richard rose at last and walked toward Ethan. The applause thinned as people noticed. Lily stepped closer to her father. Clara held her breath. For a moment, Richard looked as if he might reach for one last piece of pride. Then his shoulders lowered. "Mr. Walker," he said, his voice rough enough to sound unfamiliar even to himself, "I was wrong." Ethan stood slowly. He did not help Richard escape the weight of those words. He did not punish him with them either. He simply nodded. Richard looked at Lily, then at the photograph in her hand. "And I should not have laughed." Lily studied him with the honest caution of a child who knew apologies were not magic, but beginnings. "You laughed at the car," she said softly. Richard swallowed. "Yes." She looked at her father, then back at him. "And my dad." That hurt him more. Everyone saw it. Richard nodded once. "And your dad?" Ethan placed a gentle hand on Lily's back. "Thank you for saying it." Clara's eyes filled, but she blinked the tears back with dignity. Later that night, after papers were signed and reporters had gone searching for sharper words than miracle, Ethan drove Lily home through quiet Cleveland streets. The money would not appear in his account that minute, but the future had changed shape. Lily's surgery would be scheduled. The past due mortgage would be cleared. Walker and Son Garage would stay open, not as a monument to hardship, but as a place where young people without connections could learn a craft that honored patience. Ethan had already decided the first scholarship would carry Rachel's name, and the second would carry Evelyn Hart's. Clara visited the garage 3 days later, not in a sedan with tinted windows, but in jeans, boots, and a wool coat, carrying 2 coffees and a box of old Whitmore archives she had decided no family had. The right to hide. She found Ethan under the hood of a customer's pickup, working like a man who had not just watched $8 million fall from a gavel. "You know," Clara said, setting the coffee down, "most people would take a vacation." Ethan tightened a bolt. "Most people do not have Mrs. Alvarez waiting on her breaks." Clara smiled. "Your daughter's appointment?" "Friday morning." He paused, and the softness in his face said more than any speech could. "She is nervous." "So are you." "Every minute." Clara looked around the garage, at the tools, the old radio, the sunflower magnet, the place where value had been defended before the world recognized it. "I resigned from my father's foundation," she said. Ethan looked up. "What will you do now?" She placed a hand on the box of archives. "Tell the truth for a living, if I can." A week later, after Lily's procedure, Ethan brought her back to the garage wrapped in a blue blanket from the hospital. The doctors had said healing would take time, but when Ethan started Rachel's old radio by accident, a soft country song filled the room. Lily turned her head. Her eyes widened. "Daddy," she whispered, "I hear it." Ethan froze. Clara stood near the workbench, one hand over her mouth. The radio crackled, thin and imperfect, but to Ethan it sounded like sunrise. He knelt beside Lily, tears finally breaking free. "What does it sound like?" he asked. Lily listened, then smiled. "Like thunder far away." Ethan laughed softly through the ache in his throat and held her close. "No, baby," he said. "That is grace." Outside, evening settled gently over Walker and Son Garage. No crowd watched. No billionaire spoke. No gavel fell. Just a father, his daughter, and the quiet dignity of a life that had been bent by hardship but never broken. And sometimes, that is how redemption arrives. Not shouting through the front door, not dressed in gold, not asking for applause. It comes softly, through an old song, a child's smile, and the sacred silence of a man who never stopped believing that worth is not decided by the loudest voice in the room.